Detroit Coalition for the Future.
It's a tongue
of Detroit School
It's a
Children.
tongue twister.
It's a coalition that NAACP is a part of. We have 4 other co-chairs that are working, committees of large amounts of folks, and a pretty large steering committee as well coming together. We have a community listening session that we're doing where we can get feedback from individuals about what they want education to look like in the city of Detroit. So we have a survey here that we will need everyone to complete before they leave. I'm going to pass those out now, but we're going to let Ms. Buckman get started.
I'm Sharlonda Buckman. I work with Detroit's Parent Network. I've been there for, God, I can't believe this may be 10 years, a decade of my life, and I'm proud of many of the things that we've been able to do. I almost feel like Donnell could probably do this presentation, or, as she mentioned, that you guys are very involved because we got the good Reverend working with us every day, praying for us, keeping us in check, doing a number of different things as we try to push this work forward. So I want to try to provide a little bit of context for why we are together doing this work on behalf of the children in the city of Detroit. I can tell you personally, when people ask me about the work that I do, I like adults, y'all cool, but the work that I do with parents is directly related to my passion to see kids be put in a winning position. And our kids haven't been winning for a long time, and so my strategy to get there is that if we could get parents to a point where they could have that aha moment, where they could understand that you have the power to change things today, then we can put our kids on a different trajectory. And so everything we do at the Detroit Parent Network is to that end, getting them involved in their kids' education, getting them to decide that your house is not going to be a hangout. It's going to actually be a place where you have a homework table like my mom did when we were little, and you prioritize the things that's going to push them forward. And the work that I've done over the last decade, I would say I've probably been part of about 7 different coalitions. And when I look over to Reverend Anthony the other day, I said, you've probably been part of about 25 or so, because you've been out here a little bit longer than I have. And we just kind of laugh about it. And so people say, well, okay, another coalition, another plan, what difference is it going to make? And what I tell people is that when I got invited to come to the first meeting, not realizing all of what we would began to do to the coalition, I came into the room, and because Tanya called me up and asked me to come. And when I looked around, Detroit is a very unforgiving town. And so you can advocate and push for different issues. And sometimes people just don't get over it. They don't believe in the Stephen Covey. We can agree to disagree agreeably and move on. It's almost like we didn't agree on this issue, and so we are arch enemies, right? I don't like it, but that's one of the realities of our city. And so as I sat down in the room, I was like, what the hell is wrong with Tanya? I said, could you have warned me that we were going to have these different folks? We've been on all different sides of the issues. And so, and she said something very manipulative to me that I realized after the fact. She says, no, because you're my friend and I love you, and I know you got my back. And I said, well, you need to lower your expectations of your friends, okay? I can tell you from that moment to this one that nobody has left the table. That when you talk about unexpected bedfellows, if you will, that we have, folks from all across the city representing all different types of interests who have literally put down all of their weapons because we have to get this work done. And so I heard you mention grand bargaining, and I read the meta message as well, but point being, in order to get grand bargaining done, one of the things that the mayor shared with us as we spoke with him is that they were on one page. And I think the incentive and the common denominator for everybody that sits at that table is that, this is our moment and we're not going to get another chance. We have lost too many kids. We have too many kids fail. It's just been too much, and we've all been working on this issue. I could just cry thinking about it in our own silos, but not enough progress, not fast enough for the number of kids that we're losing. I stopped watching the news because I can't do it. I live this work every day. We have parents in centers, and you hear story after story after story. And so, it's one of the things that keeps me fueled in believing that we got to get this thing right. And so I believe that every person that is sitting at that table is in passion with the same thinking, spinning your wheels, working on it from these different angles, and still losing, because if our kids lose, we lose. So let me talk to you a little bit about what's happening in Detroit. So in December, we had this group of folks come together in this meeting that Tanya invited me to, and we began to talk about this. It was not in response to the governor or anything like that, as people would have you believe. So that'd be my first plug to say, don't believe what you read in the paper, because we have not set forward one recommendation yet. But rather looking at the education and landscape, where several years ago we had primarily one school system, and now we have three servicing Detroit children. One of the challenges that we have is the landscape is very messy. When you think about having had in the past one primary school district to now we have 12 different authorizers who can open and close schools in the city of Detroit, mostly open. They are Detroit Public Schools, they are Bay Mills and Eastern Michigan University. You have the Education Achievement Authorities, and a lot of sensation around that. You have, and I've been a part of that, Ferris State University. I could go on about the university, but there are 12 different authorizers. The problem is none of them talk to each other. So if you have a high performance school, maybe in this neighborhood, somebody can open up right next door to you, and there's no conversation. There's no analysis really done besides to see what the number of students you have available in that community might be. And there's no conversation with the community even to say, do we need another school? What are the needs of our community? There's no dialogue. They just kind of set up shop and they begin to do their business, which I think is part of the mess that we actually have. Part of what's driving that is the economic incentives. Last year, authorizers got paid $24 million. That's a lot of money just to issue a charter to open a school. Grand Valley is at the top of that list. They raked in a good $7.8 million, didn't educate one child. And I don't say that in the sense that their schools aren't all doing well. They're actually one of the better authorizers. I say that in the sense that that money doesn't go to purchase one book, pay one teacher, heat one building. That is the 3% fee that they get off the top just to authorize a school. And that is one of the challenges that we have. So 24 million. And even though over the last 10 years, we have not increased in population, we've actually decreased in population. We've gone from about 200,000 kids to just under 130,000 school-aged children. We've actually continued to open schools. And so you almost have more supply than demand. And so that creates another imbalance in which schools struggle economically because everybody's fighting for the same students, which creates an environment where now instead of the school being able to focus on the academic supports and excellence and wraparound support services that our kids need and the professional development that teachers need, they're spending their time trying to capture the students. And I've referred to it as a snatch and grab, where folks are out there recruiting because it's about getting kids in seats. And so the conversation around excellence takes a back seat to that because it's about, I need to have at least 200 students in this building to make my budget. And that's not okay, but that's the environment that we have. Since 2009, we've actually closed and opened quite a few schools. Charter schools opened about 40 new schools since 2009. They're still coming. One of the things that happened when Detroit Public Schools lost their first class school district status is that it opened up the door for charters to come in. The problem is that legislation failed to include in there that you had to be a proven education organization, meaning you have educated children who look like ours, you've done it successfully, and so we can trust you because this is supposed to be the alternative to get to a better place. But that wasn't in there, and so we have everybody and your mama who think they can run a school or has a great idea coming to educate our children. Not okay. DPS since 2009 has actually closed 102 schools, and many of you have probably lived in and around neighborhoods where that type of activity has a ripple effect on the community. In some cases, they're trying to get the buildings together, but you have people that'll go in and strip them, so it becomes an eyesore. People worry about their property values. And in my neighborhood, I tell folks when I was a little girl, my dad would come pick me up, and he could leave out the back door of our house, go across the street, walk into the school. He could come check on me. Now, if he had to pick me up as a little girl, he would have to walk out the back door, walk to the bus stop, catch a bus, probably still walk 5 blocks when he got off the bus, only to come into a school where he was less than welcomed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we do on my specific committee, but I want to take you through a few other things in reference to the coalition. So we have, part of the problem with the authorizers that we have is that you have in Northwest Detroit about 3,800 children who are 15 to 17 who need to go to high school, right? So I'm going to ask you guys to do the math on this. This is a little bit of a test. So there's about 3,800 high school students in Northwest Detroit. In Northeast Detroit, there's about 6,000 students in that community that are high schoolers who need to go to high school. And then downtown, you got less than 2,000, about 1,800 students. Across all three neighborhoods, and I just picked these three, there is a total of 16 high schools. So if you had to place schools according to the numbers I gave you, 3,800 in Northwest, 6,000 in Northeast, and 1,800 in downtown, where would you place those 16?
Northwest.
What you got?
The reality is that almost half of them are in Northeast Detroit. You'd almost have to put half the schools there.
You should have put at least 8 there, because at least half the kids are there. Okay. Any other thoughts on that? So let me tell you what's real. So in Northwest Detroit, where you have about 4,000 15 to 17-year-olds who need to go to high school, you have 3 high schools. That means roughly each building would have to house over 1,000 kids in that building. In Northeast, where you have 6,000 young people who need to go to high school, there are only 2 high schools in that neighborhood. So that means those kids have to leave their community to go to school. Not the case when I was a kid. And that number for when I was a kid is getting longer, further away. But in downtown, where you only have 18 young people, you have 11 high schools. So this is the problem with no coordination among authorizers in opening and closing schools. So you have a concentration of 11 high schools in a community that has less than a third of the kids in the city. Less than a quarter of the kids in this city. And so that's not okay. That's part of the challenge that we're faced with.